After 20 years of marriage, my husband kicked me out and told me he was leaving me for his pregnant mistress. I just smiled because he had no idea who I really was. Have you ever wondered how blind a man can be to not see the fire burning behind the gaze of a silent woman? Anna was 42 years old and invisible. Not to the world, because to the neighbors, she was the model wife of the successful businessman Alejandro, but to the only man she had ever given her soul to. They had been married for 20 years. 2 decades of hot breakfasts, perfectly ironed shirts, sparkling bathrooms, and soft smiles that masked the loneliness. No one suspected what really went on inside that White House with its perfectly manicured garden. The kitchen clock read 6:05. The sun was just beginning to filter through the blinds as Anna already had her hands in the flour, preparing the artisanal breads Alejandro liked so much. Her hair was tied up in a high ponytail, she wore a light blue robe, and was softly humming a tune she couldn't remember the origin of. Maybe from a distant childhood. Maybe from the years when she still believed in promises of eternal love. As she kneaded, her thoughts kept returning to the same question that had haunted her in recent months. Why didn't Alejandro look at her the way he used to? It wasn't jealousy she felt. It was something deeper. It was the cold. The absence of that little spark in his eyes. That barely noticeable touch as he passed behind her in the kitchen. The silences at night had grown heavier. And even though he still slept beside her, she no longer felt his presence. "Good morning," Alejandro said as he walked into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. She turned to him with an automatic smile. "Your breakfast is ready. Black coffee, avocado toast, and 2 boiled eggs." Alejandro sat down, opened the newspaper, and didn't respond. That gesture, which to many might have seemed insignificant, hit Anna like a blow to the chest. Not because of the indifference, but because of what it revealed. He no longer felt the need to pretend. The Alejandro from before would have responded with a kiss, a sweet comment, or a caress on the waist. Now, there was only routine. Cold, calculated, almost contemptuous. "Do you have the meeting with the Koreans today?" she asked, serving him the coffee. "Yes," he replied, without lifting his eyes from the paper. A lie. There was no meeting. But Anna didn't confront him. She just watched him for a few more seconds. She studied every expression, every muscle in his face, like a patient scientist observing a specimen. Something didn't add up. She felt it in his gestures, in the way he had avoided touching her for weeks, in the messages that kept arriving on his phone with suspicious frequency and with men's names she knew didn't exist. Alejandro had never bothered to be a good liar, because deep down, he didn't believe Anna was capable of finding out. "Do you need me to get your clothes ready?" "I already did it last night," he replied curtly, swallowing without looking at her. When he left for the office, Anna leaned on the counter with both hands and closed her eyes. The trembling in her fingers wasn't fear. It was restraint, like a dam holding back pressure that grew, day after day. She felt that something was about to explode. She had no concrete proof, just a hunch, but that hunch clung to her spine like a claw. 3 hours passed. She was cleaning the kitchen hood when she heard the lock turn. The door opened. Alejandro had come back. "Did you forget something?" she asked from the hallway, removing her cleaning gloves. "No. We need to talk." The words every human being dreads. But Anna didn't show surprise. She dried her hands with a towel, motioned for him to go to the living room, and sat in front of him, legs together, hands resting on her knees. Alejandro didn't sit right away. He paced back and forth, frowning. Swallowed hard, clenched his teeth. "Today's the anniversary of our first coffee together," she said with a faint smile. "We never celebrate it, but I always remember." He didn't respond. He just stopped and fixed his eyes on her. A cold stare, almost empty. "Anna, I can't keep living this lie." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm with another woman." The silence dropped like a brick into a lake. Anna's breathing became imperceptible. Not from shock, but out of the need for control. She forced herself not to tremble, not to break. How long? She asked in a soft, almost maternal voice. Months. I didn't plan it. I just realized there's nothing left between us. Aina narrowed her eyes. And who is she? Camila. She's 27. She's everything you're not anymore. She's fun, free, spontaneous. And she's pregnant. That sentence pierced her chest like an icy needle. Alejandro wasn't just betraying her, he was replacing her. And not with someone similar, but with a younger, more flexible, moldable version. Someone who wouldn't question him. Someone who didn't know her ruins. So, you're asking me to leave? I'm not asking. I'm informing you. He stepped closer. His eyes finally showed what she had long feared, contempt. You're fat, Aina. Covered in stretch marks. You're furniture. Just a damn piece of furniture in this house. You're no good in bed, no good in life. You're a piñata stuffed with shit. Look at your hands, greasy from the kitchen. Is that what I am? The CEO of a company living with a maid. Aina looked down, not out of shame, but because if she looked at him any longer, she'd kill him with her eyes. Is that all? No. Don't think you're entitled to anything. Not the house, not the car, not a single cent. I built everything. You just cooked and cleaned. Don't even think about taking me to court. You've got no chance. You've got no friends. No family. Nothing. Then she stood up. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't break anything. She walked to the bedroom, took out a medium-sized suitcase, packed 5 pieces of clothing, a pair of shoes, a toothbrush, and her phone. She walked down the stairs with the same calm she used every day when changing the sheets. As she passed by Alejandro, he let out a sarcastic laugh. That's it? You're leaving that easy. She looked at him with a coldness he'd never seen before. Were you expecting a scene? Sorry to disappoint. And without another word, she walked out. Alejandro stood frozen, as if still processing what had just happened. Then he shrugged, pulled out his phone, and dialed. Camila, it's done. We're sleeping together tonight. His smile widened. He thought he had one. In his mind, he had just closed a dull chapter to begin a vibrant life, free, unburdened, without the shadow of a worn-out woman who was no longer useful. What Alejandro didn't know was that he had just unleashed a force beyond anything his worst nightmares could have imagined. The hurricane had just awakened. And it had a name, Aina. The invisible, the submissive, the queen in the shadows. Her story wasn't over. It had just begun. An hour later, Aina quietly closed the building's door behind her, moving with the stealth of a cat stalking its prey. She took the elevator up to the private penthouse she had bought 2 years earlier. The cabin smelled of polished wood, and the mirror reflected dark circles no one ever saw. When she arrived, she turned on the floor lamp. A warm glow spread across the parquet and the marble of the open kitchen. Nothing in that space hinted at the housewife life she had left behind. Bookshelves packed with commercial law volumes, framed diplomas with her full name, a safe hidden behind an abstract painting. She dropped the suitcase on the white couch without caring about wrinkling the upholstery. Then she walked to the wine cabinet, chose a reserve red, and poured herself a glass with surgical precision, measuring each second as if time itself were now a resource she could afford to waste. From the safe, she pulled out a signed and notarized purchase agreement. The property had been paid in full with company profits, but in her name. She rested her fingers on the signature, tasted the wine, and let the cherry and oak flavor remind her of all those nights she studied while Alejandro snored, thinking she was asleep. She turned on her phone and dialed a number saved as B. The line rang 3 times before a male voice answered, breathless. "Boss, I didn't expect your call so soon," Bruno whispered. "Activate winter phase," she ordered, gazing out the window at the twinkling city. "Hand in your resignation today. No niceties. Demand the triple severance we agreed on. And call the auditor we've kept on ice." "Auditor, sorry. auditor, he corrected himself, remembering the cover story. She'll be there first thing tomorrow. Want chaos at sunrise? I need it. And leak to HR that Alejandro is planning a mass layoff. I want total confusion. Bruno swallowed hard. He was a burly man with a trimmed beard who, until that morning, delivered fast food. Thanks to the night training Ana gave him, he learned the company's organizational chart, the difference between cash flow and EBITDA, and how to pronounce brainstorming without stuttering. At the office, they saw him as Alejandro's loyal extension, when in fact, he was a pawn with clear instructions: observe, gather, document. Done, she replied. And by the way, the little bump already made its debut. Ana raised an eyebrow. The what? Camila's imaginary baby bump. Looks like she confessed the lie this afternoon. They're screaming up in the executive attic. I can hear them from the archives. A half-smile spread across her face. Camila had played her card earlier than expected. That would speed up a few gears. She hung up. Then she dialed another number, Attorney Clara Galan, a specialist in high-stakes restructurings and divorces. Clara, file for divorce tomorrow at 9. I want provisional measures on the marital home and all vehicles. Use the protection clause I added 10 years ago. The one he signed without reading? Clara asked, both amazed and intrigued. That one. Also, freeze every account where my second last name appears. The court will approve it. Will show risk of asset stripping. Clara took notes, trying to keep the excitement from affecting her professional tone. Ana hung up again, turned off the main light, and sat at the kitchen island with her laptop open in incognito mode. She reprogrammed access to online banking. Within 36 hours, several transfers would be parked in fiduciary accounts he wouldn't be able to cancel. She checked emails, documented every step in an encrypted cloud, and before closing out, drafted a message to Alejandro with a simple subject: freedom. She didn't send it. Not yet. That night, Alejandro believed the universe was still spinning in his favor. He lit scented candles and played chill-out music to impress Camila, though he sensed her distant gaze. She walked barefoot, wearing an oversized t-shirt and holding her phone. Suddenly, she dropped it like it burned. Ale, I need to tell you something, she began, twisting the shirt in a childish gesture. The test came out wrong. I'm not pregnant. I never was. He frowned and turned his back on her, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He couldn't believe how quickly his freshly laid foundation was starting to crack. You used me, he asked, gripping the glass. Camila tried to pout. If I didn't give you that push, you would have never left that woman. I love you, Alejandro, but I needed proof. Now we can be happy. Alejandro hurled the glass at the stainless steel sink. The shards fell like broken bells. He didn't dare hit her, but the gesture alone was enough to destroy any chance of immediate reconciliation. He stumbled out of the kitchen, cursing under his breath that he would fix all of it. Dawn arrived with a literal storm in the sky and a figurative one at the company. Alejandro walked through reception without greeting anyone. Marina, the admin manager, approached looking ashen. Bruno just handed in his resignation, she blurted. And the tax auditor is in room 9. Alejandro felt a stab in his chest. He thought it was anxiety, though his ego whispered another excuse. He pushed open the glass door. Inside, the auditor was laying out folders and a laptop, her expression one of controlled satisfaction. The official badge logo read, Fiscal Oversight Division. We need immediate access to servers and account statements from the past 5 years, she said softly, like she was asking for tea. This is irregular. I didn't get any prior notice. It was sent to your legal director's email 15 days ago. We have red confirmation. Either way, we're proceeding. When he tried to find Bruno to counter the inspection, he got a text, 3 years severance or a lawsuit for workplace harassment. He cursed. Blinded by rage, he ordered IT to shut down the network, but the technicians said the auditor had authorization to seize the physical drives if needed. By 10 a.m., Rumors spread like wildfire, layoff threats, side conversations, employees uploading personal files to the cloud fearing a raid. Every hand Alejandro shook returned a sweaty, nervous grip. At noon, his corporate card was declined at the restaurant where he meant to impress a South Korean supplier. He tried his personal card, also declined. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and saw a red alert. Access suspended by provisional court order. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He called Camila. Line busy. Called his financial advisor. No answer. He ran to the garage, jumped into his sports car, and saw that VIP parking now required license plate scanning. The system didn't recognize him. He honked. The guard appeared, face apologetic. Your license plate has been deactivated. Higher orders. Alejandro roared, spun the wheel, nearly crashing into a column, exited to the street, and drove home. Camila had filled the living room with luxury shopping bags, tags dangling like flags. He charged forward like a wounded bull. My cards don't work, he shouted. She pursed her lips. The saleswoman said the same thing when I tried to pay for brunch. Are you having balance issues? He shot her a glare, then forced a mask of artificial calm. Nothing serious. Banking distractions. I'm heading to the office. Once inside, he locked the door and dialed his trusted attorney. Busy. He tried Marina. 8 rings before she answered, crying. They're questioning the accounting team. They say the financials are smoke and mirrors. He threw the phone against the wall. The case popped off and the battery fell out. He breathed like a gunslinger about to shoot until the landline rang. He hesitated. Picked up. A firm, unfamiliar female voice. Good afternoon. This is Clara Galan, legal representative of Ms. Ana Santos. I'm notifying you of the immediate filing for divorce, along with a request for provisional measures. An officer will arrive shortly with the documents. Alejandro felt like he'd been clubbed. He didn't even process the word divorce. His mind froze on Santos, that second surname she never used in social settings. The buzzing in his head grew louder when the doorbell rang. He ran to the entrance. A man in a gray suit with a metal briefcase raised a hand with professional courtesy. Judicial notification, he said. I need your signature for receipt. Camila appeared in the hallway, barefoot, eyes wide. What's going on, Ale? He ignored the official, turned and muttered through clenched teeth. Nothing I can't fix. He signed like a robot, took the envelope, and went upstairs to his office. Tore open the seal and read, account freeze, precautionary seizure of 50% of marital assets, vehicle hold pending further ruling. The ground seemed to give way. That woman he once dismissed as furniture was now building a legal wall around everything he thought was his. His phone powered on by itself. The battery had settled back into place. The screen was shattered, but it had a signal. Ringing. Unknown number. He swiped. Who's this? On the other end, that calm, almost sweet voice he had ignored for years. Alejandro. Surprised to hear from me. Where the hell are you? Somewhere with a nice view. He swallowed. What did you do with my accounts? Technically, they're not yours. You signed a power of attorney in my name when you thought you were authorizing your assistant for bank errands. Reading was never your strength. Notaries, however, were mine. Alejandro cursed under his breath. Return the funds. We can negotiate. On the other side, she laughed silently. You're nowhere near understanding the new equation. Let me introduce someone who also wants a word. Ana switched to speakerphone. Another voice chimed in, a flat, bureaucratic tone, though Alejandro didn't recognize it. Provisional Tax Administrator. We confirm the account blocks pending clarification of potential fraud. You are summoned tomorrow at 8 a.m. Alejandro clenched the phone. This is a setup. My assistant can vouch for the transparency of my transactions. A click. Then Bruno's calm voice. Your assistant? I quit. Thanks for the leadership seminars you never paid for. I've moved on to better goals. Tense silence. Alejandro's heavy breathing filled the room. Bruno, don't do this. I'll triple your salary. I need access. I'm not your accomplice, Bruno replied. And I never was. You'd be better off asking your wife who really planned every move of your empire while you just posed for the cameras. The call ended. Alejandro threw the phone again, this time for good. No battery left to revive it. Camila opened the door halfway. Is something wrong? She asked in a trembling voice. He turned slowly, eyes burning, and muttered, If you want to survive, pack a bag. I don't know how long before they evict us. She let out a strangled cry, backed away, and choked on her own sobs. He walked past her, went down to the garage, and tried to start his sports car to clear his head, but the dashboard displayed a judicial block message. He pounded the steering wheel until he split the skin on his knuckle. Went back upstairs. Camila was stuffing clothes into a gym bag. The luxury shopping bags were left behind and forgotten. Where are you planning to go? She asked. To my office. I still have my position. There's something I can salvage. Chaos reigned at the company. A security guard stopped him at reception. You can't go in, sir. The biometric system recognizes you, but the audit has you restricted. They need you to return tomorrow with your lawyers. Alejandro shoved him aside and climbed the emergency stairs. When he opened the door to the main hallway, he saw the auditor interrogating the accountant. Employees moved away as if from a ghost. In the central office, drawers were open, stacks of documents piled up, hard drives labeled for removal. He sat in his chair, head in hands, as if the whole building were spinning around him. Marina entered with hesitant steps. I was looking for you, she whispered. I found this file in the safety deposit box. It's signed by Anna. According to this, she's the majority shareholder. Is it real? He looked up. A gesture of disbelief swallowed the last traces of arrogance. That can't be. I founded this. Marina placed the file on the desk and left without daring to offer comfort. Alejandro opened it. There were the articles of incorporation, 60% under the name of Ana Santos, 35% under his own, and 5% in redeemed preferred shares transferred to Bruno. Notarized documents, fresh seals, old dates. He had been living a lie. Or worse, he had signed his own sentence. He leaned back, trying to remember every moment of the last 20 years. The day he asked Ana to drop that second college degree because one diploma on the wall is enough, the afternoon he gave her power of attorney for minor paperwork the nights she spent on her laptop, saying she was reading cooking magazines, when in reality she was perfecting a master plan. It all made sense now, but the truth was harsher than the cruelest dream. Night fell. At home, Camila saw the headlights of the car turn off as Alejandro returned on foot, walking under the light rain. He entered soaked, his tie hanging like a noose. He collapsed on the couch, eyes burning. She destroyed me. Camila didn't know how to comfort a man who had used her as a trophy. She sat far away and spoke in a soft voice. We can leave, start over in another city. With what money? He snapped, almost laughing. You think any bank will lend me a cent with this audit going on? My accounts are frozen, my assets seized, my employees against me. Camila stood up and headed toward the stairs. I'm not made for ruin, Ale. I need stability. He followed her with his eyes, watching her silhouette fade into the hallway. He didn't even have the strength to stop her. His mind overflowed with images of lawyers, inspectors, murmuring workers, and above all, the serene figure of Ana, holding a glass of wine, gazing at the city without a care. He knew this was a war he could no longer win. At 2 a.m, sitting in the shadows, he heard the front door close. Camila had left with a single suitcase. The echo of her heels faded along the wet sidewalk, reminding him that loneliness isn't always silent. Sometimes it wears designer shoes and expensive perfume. Alejandro hugged himself, deciphering the sour scent of his own defeat. And he realized the empire he had boasted about had always been built on paper foundations, held up by the hands of a woman he had once called furniture. In her penthouse, Aina received a message. Bruno, with no preamble, wrote, "Enemy forces in retreat. Accountants cooperating. Audit to proceed as planned." She set the phone down, drank the last sip of wine, and let out a sigh. It wasn't relief. It was the sound of an engine starting inside her, the certainty that the hardest part was over, but the legal war was just beginning its fireworks. Lightning lit up the city. The sky roared from the clouds. And she, the queen in the shadows, finally smiled. Because sometimes, to conquer a castle, all it takes is lifting a key that's always been hidden in the pocket of a housewife's slim dress. That night, Aina slept exactly 3 hours, not because guilt weighed on her, but because the adrenaline of victory buzzed in her temples. At dawn, she turned on the mocha pot, reviewed her to-do list, and calmly attended the birth of her new professional life, EOS Agency, legal and strategic consulting for women who suspected that love could become a trap. She scheduled the launch of her website, prepared press notes, and sent a concise message to her small but influential academic circle, opening 5 pilot slots. Complex cases. Absolute confidentiality. She never imagined that by noon, she would have received 32 applications. On the other side of the city, Alejandro shuffled across the parquet floor of his penthouse, now a ghostly maze of empty boxes and stale odors. Silence was broken only by the click of his laptop, whose incoming emails struck like daggers, suppliers demanding payments, banks asking for explanations, and journalists sniffing for fresh meat. Camila reappeared at midday with dark glasses and a new suitcase, bought by selling the last piece of jewelry he had given her. "I'm leaving," she said, arms crossed. "I'm not your nurse." Alejandro stood still, staring at the sliver of light under the door. He caught himself about to beg, then dismissed the idea. Pleading felt more degrading than ruin. She held out her phone and showed him a digital headline, "Former CEO under tax investigation. Possible multimillion-dollar embezzlement." He read his full name and felt a crushing weight on his chest. "This is temporary," he murmured, almost to himself. "I'm going to clear my name." Camila put on her glasses even though they were indoors. "I'll call you when karma's healed," she replied before closing the door and vanishing. The attic filled with the sour scent of spent candle wax. Alejandro picked up the landline and dialed the office of Miller and Associates. The receptionist took a while to answer. "The senior partner reserves the right to decline new cases. I wish you luck." He hung up, stunned, and called Lex Quantum, a prestigious criminal law boutique. Same response. He tried 3 more firms, always hitting the same wall. They knew the case involved forged documents and didn't want to get burned. Pride gave way to panic. He took a cold shower, put on a suit that still smelled of past success, and headed out to sell the sports car. The luxury dealership offered only a fraction of the original price. Word had gotten out. He clenched his jaw, accepted, signed, and left with a check that felt more like an epitaph than a lifeline. By sunset, he was moving into a 430-square-foot apartment with peeling walls, 2 borrowed pieces of furniture, and a mattress on pallets. He paid 3 months' rent in advance. That was all his cash reserves allowed. A strange vertigo took hold of him. In that space without paintings, secrets, or memories, every humiliating phrase he'd hurled at the woman now behind his downfall echoed. He turned on the laptop, searched for jobs on generic portals, and logged off when he realized his name was toxic. No one would contact a man under investigation for fraud. The press didn't take long to dig deeper. The next day, the Global Finance cover featured a collage, Alejandro smiling as he cut a red ribbon alongside public officials, and below, a screenshot of the audit with redacted numbers and the title Empire of Smoke. Columnists piled on. The fall of a hero, the latest dark chapter in business, the financial widow who had really pulled the strings. Public opinion turned Alejandro into a meme. His face went viral alongside the phrase, "Let your ex manage your life, but don't let her run it." Ana took notes without celebration. In her newly furnished office in soft tones, she welcomed her first client, a young dentist who suspected shady dealings by her husband. Ana listened patiently, laid out a legal roadmap, and saw something telling. The woman left with eyes more open and spine more upright. The mission of the EOS agency wasn't just about winning cases, it was about restoring dignity. When the door closed, Ana breathed deeply, aware that the energy she once used to sustain a sterile home was now becoming a safety net for others. Meanwhile, Bruno was packing his life into 5 cardboard boxes. Ana paid him the promised severance and arranged the visa for Canada. She had contacts there in need of a bilingual logistics analyst. At the airport, he thanked her, eyes glistening. "You changed my life," he said. "You gave me an identity when I felt invisible." "You were the one who claimed it," she replied. A quick hug, separate flights, and Bruno's story joined the constellation of collateral wins from her master plan. The legal snowball kept rolling. The prosecutor's office summoned Alejandro to testify. He showed up in a cheap suit, crooked tie, and accompanied by a public defender. His previous attorneys had all dropped him. The official read out the charges: tax evasion, falsified documents, possible money laundering. Alejandro tried to explain it was all a setup by his ex-wife and an inexperienced former employee. The room filled with mocking murmurs when the prosecutor played videos from years ago, where Alejandro boasted in conferences about being the ultimate visionary who didn't need internal controls. His own words became shackles. Outside, journalists were waiting. "What does it feel like to lose everything because you underestimated your wife?" one reporter asked. He tried to walk away, but couldn't. The camera stayed tight on his sweaty face. He responded with a grimace that went instantly viral. That night's headline was brutal: "The high cost of machismo, what happens when you undervalue a woman?" The comments section exploded with mockery. Night fell. Alejandro turned on the kitchen light in his small apartment. Cans of tuna on the table, stale bread, the TV on low, narrating his own downfall. When he changed the channel, an ad came on, EOS agency offering legal services with a gender perspective. Ana's face wasn't shown, just the logo, a hummingbird rising. Even without a name, he felt her presence more than ever. A week passed. His most valuable belongings now fit in 2 boxes. The money from the car had vanished in unexpected expenses: 2 months' rent, public defender fees, medical bills from an anxiety attack that landed him in the ER. He needed work. He walked through industrial zones, left resumes. Managers recognized him and avoided eye contact. On the main street of a working-class neighborhood, he spotted a mechanic shop with a sign, "Help wanted. No smokers." He pushed the door open, nearly without hope. The owner, a bald man with a snake tattoo on his forearm, looked him up and down. "Can you change a spark plug without setting the block on fire?" he asked in a deep voice. "I learn fast," Alejandro replied. The tattooed man handed him a blue coverall, led him to the pit, and pointed at an old car. "If you can take out the transmission before closing, you're hired." Alejandro put on the gloves, sweated, and got grease on his forehead. When he handed over the parts, the owner gave a grunt of approval. "Start tomorrow. 7:30. Weekly cash pay. No questions about my tax return." That night, Alejandro returned to the studio smelling of oil and metal. He looked at his blackened hands. He remembered all the times he had hired mechanics for his luxury fleet and how he had never said more than 3 words to them. The irony tasted like rust. He washed his hands several times. Even so, the grease stayed embedded under his nails, as if life were tattooing his new reality. Meanwhile, at the EOS agency headquarters, Ana was leading an online seminar titled Women's Asset Protection, From Love to Contracts. 100 participants listened attentively. She explained the importance of joint ownership, power of attorney, and the difference between trust and naivety. She ended the lecture with a phrase that resonated among the attendees: "Whoever controls the information controls the future." The chat window filled with thank yous, emojis, and appointment requests. She turned off her webcam and let the silence of her office wrap around her. Her pulse felt tired, but she also felt a new kind of peace. She no longer had to justify her intelligence. Now she shared it. 2 days later, she went out for a walk to clear her mind. The Central Park buzzed with kids running and mothers chatting. Aina passed by a bench where 2 women in workout clothes were talking. "The new mechanic at the corner shop is a jerk," said the first. "He spoke to me like I didn't know the difference between oil and water." The other laughed. "Must be that guy from the viral video. Did you see it? The ex-millionaire who turned into a joke. They say he insults the female customers." Aina paused, turned around, and pretended to tie her shoe to listen better. "His hands shake," the first continued. "And he's got a twitch in his eye. You can tell he's broken." Aina felt a bitter sting of curiosity. She followed the artificial river until she reached the shop. The old sign, the open metal door, and the strong smell of fuel confirmed she was in the right place. She stayed outside, watching. In the pit, Alejandro, stained all over, was desperately hammering at a stubborn bolt. The blue coverall hung loose on him, like his body had shrunk. He cursed under his breath. The owner cracked a sexist joke, and Alejandro laughed, a hollow sound, more plea than amusement. She hadn't intended to see him. But just then, a customer arrived with a sedan. As he got out, he recognized Aina. He was the notary who had signed her apartment deed. He greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Santos, what a coincidence. Are you bringing your car?" Alejandro looked up, his eyes scanning the shop until they landed on her. The silence thickened. The notary, oblivious, kept talking about taxes and new laws. Aina held Alejandro's gaze without a flicker, like someone watching a candle burn out after it no longer lights the room. The shop owner whistled. "Alejandro, stop standing around. Roll that tire." He didn't move. He dropped the wrench and walked to the entrance. His face was sweaty, the coverall torn at the elbow, an oil stain below his ear. He stopped 2 steps from her. The notary, surprised, discreetly stepped back. "You came to mock me," Alejandro said hoarsely. "No. I was walking and heard stories," she replied, without harshness. "I just made sure you were alive. That's all." He swallowed hard, looked at his dirty gloves, then at Aina's clean hands. "I ruined my life," he admitted. "I thought you were weak. I thought you needed me." "I needed peace," she corrected him. "And now I have it." The shop owner let out an impatient whistle. "Hey, kid, cars don't fix themselves." Alejandro lowered his head, but allowed himself one last shred of dignity. "Can I buy you a coffee?" he asked. "No," she replied softly. "I've had enough bitter coffee." She turned, said goodbye to the notary, and walked upstream. Alejandro watched her until her silhouette blended into the trees. The owner burst out laughing. "Your ex? She's got you well trained, rooster." Alejandro picked up the wrench, went back to the engine, and loosened the bolt like a robot. Each metallic turn was a reminder. Power had returned to where it belonged. He in the pit, she above. There was no hatred in her final words. Just a wall of indifference taller than any revenge. At dusk, Aina arrived at her penthouse. She turned on the soft light over the glass table. An envelope was waiting. Bruno had sent a postcard from Vancouver. "Free," it said in capital letters. She stuck it to the fridge. Then she opened the balcony, felt the fresh air, and accepted that the loudest chapter of the drama had ended. The echoes remained, the legal paperwork, the therapy offices filled with similar stories. And even so, she allowed herself a minute of wind on her face, a minute where remorse couldn't walk through the door. Alejandro finished his shift at 8. He collected an envelope filled with crumpled bills and took the bus to the gray neighborhood he now called home. Sitting by the window, he noticed his reflection. The once arrogant glint had been replaced by a tired shadow. Still, the shadow told an honest story, no filters, no cardboard luxuries. When he got off, he looked up at the cloud-covered sky and wondered if he would ever truly laugh again. That night, in his expense notebook, he jotted down what little remained of his weekly pay. He added another line, "Lesson learned. Arrogance charges exorbitant interest." He closed the notebook, leaned his head against the peeling wall, and let the silence of the working-class neighborhood lull him to sleep. He could hear footsteps in the hallway, muffled laughter, distant TVs narrating game shows. None of it belonged to him, but for the first time, he recognized that the loss was precise, no more, no less, than the weight of his own contempt. Ana, standing by the window, watched the city lights flicker. She remembered the first time she ironed Alejandro's shirt and thought those gestures had made sense when they still spoke the same language. After that, they had become chains. She took a deep breath, checked the calendar. Tomorrow the EOS agency would meet with an architect, a graphic designer, and a mathematician. She smiled, thinking of the variety of worlds now converging in her office. Before going to bed, she wrote in her digital journal, "Dignity has no expiration date. The price of deceit is high, but freedom is worth every coin." And so, in two distant corners of the same city, two sleepless souls processed the partial reckoning of the war they had waged. He understood that resentment doesn't nourish, but at least regret teaches. She confirmed that effective revenge never screams. It signs documents and hands out business cards embossed with a hummingbird. One chapter remains to know whether their scars will fully heal or pulse with every sunrise. For now, the city kept breathing, and the echo of their stories scattered through alleyways, greasy workshops, and illuminated offices. Two opposite fates, one shared lesson. Those who underestimate love open the door to disaster, and those who stay silent can unleash unforeseen storms. The city woke under a pearly sky as Ana closed the balcony and turned on the coffee maker. It had been months since she last felt that constant shiver she used to confuse with love. Now the tingling was pure, well-directed ambition. The EOS agency occupied 2 full floors of a glass building, her team made up of 15 female lawyers, 3 economists, and a forensic psychologist. Every Friday they held a brief meeting, free of flashy hierarchies, to review cases and propose improvements. Ana started each one with the same phrase, "Information is the passport to freedom." No one corrected her. Her results spoke for themselves. Not a single client had lost a case since the agency opened. The specialized press asked to interview her. She only accepted when they guaranteed the focus would be on structural reform and asset-related justice, not her personal life. Even so, journalists indulged in juicy paragraphs about the legend of the wife turned lethal strategist. She pretended not to read them, although Clara, her lawyer, sent her the clippings just in case a defamation suit was needed. It wasn't. Most celebrated her achievement as an example of resilience. Alejandro, for his part, left the shop at 7:30 every morning, with blackened nails and a stiff back. The boss's jokes had shifted from simple mockery to indifference, a new stage where Alejandro existed only as a pair of hands, no longer as the target of jokes. Upon arrival, he would grunt a greeting, change in a locker room that smelled of old gasoline, and dive into whichever engine needed fixing without asking questions. Tips were almost non-existent. Neighborhood clients haggled over every cent. Nothing like the world of Swiss watches and gold-sealed contracts he had once ruled. His mind revisited every insult, every dinner where he belittled the woman who ironed his shirts. Guilt threatened to drown him, but he learned to confine it to a corner so it wouldn't paralyze him. He didn't do it for dignity. He did it because if he gave in to self-pity, the wrench would shake and the boss would fire him. Miguel, a 23-year-old apprentice, admired him in secret. He didn't know the tired-eyed veteran had once led a $100 million corporation. He only saw a guy who spotted oil leaks faster than anyone and swapped spark plugs with a surgeon's precision. One morning, Miguel asked, "Where'd you learn all this?" Alejandro swallowed and answered without looking up, "Life teaches you to dismantle everything you think works." Miguel laughed, thinking it was a philosophical joke. Alejandro didn't laugh. In another social stratum, the EOS agency received an unexpected visit from Ernesto de la Vega, an impact investor with a velvet voice and a shark's reputation. He arrived without an appointment, light gray suit, minimalist watch, and a disruptive proposal to launch an international division dedicated to billion-dollar litigation stemming from fraudulent divorces. He explained that he had identified a massive market, heiresses losing fortunes to unscrupulous lawyers, businesswomen married to financial predators, migrant workers tricked by husbands with dual ledgers. He wanted to capitalize on that gap, of course, but also claimed a half-altruistic motive. Ana listened. She asked for numbers, reviewed projections, and took note of potential profit margins. At the end of the dossier, she stated her one condition: a mandatory revolving fund allocating 30% of profits to financial education scholarships for vulnerable girls. Ernesto raised an eyebrow. 30% is a lot. She gave a toothless smile. "I don't bargain justice at discount." Silence settled between them. Ernesto closed the folder, took a deep breath, and extended his hand. "Deal." Ana didn't smile again. She signed the papers and wrote clauses with scalpel-like precision. That night, she toasted with Clara and the founding partners on the building's rooftop. There was no champagne. They ordered craft vermouth and tortilla skewers. They raised their glasses. Clara said, "To the women who don't yet know a contract can save their life." The others responded with a soft chorus of clinking crystal. While people on the rooftop talked about continental expansion, Alejandro was checking the balance of his debit account. 384 euros left. He paid for discounted macaroni and a box of paracetamol for joint pain. In the supermarket line, a woman recognized him. "Aren't you the guy from Forbes magazine?" He shook his head. She insisted. "You look just like him." He swallowed hard and said, "Not all ghosts wear sheets." When he got home, the neighbor from the 9th floor asked him to help move a piece of furniture. Alejandro agreed. 2 hours later, they were sharing cheap beer and watching soccer on TV. The neighbor, a retired trucker, said, "Life's tough, but if you keep breathing, you learn a thing or two." Alejandro nodded, surprised at how comforting it was to be with someone who knew nothing about his story. Before bed, he checked an email from the prosecutor's office. The charge had been reduced from tax fraud to accounting negligence, thanks to proof that the falsified documents hadn't been signed by him. Clara Galan had renegotiated the charges at Ana's request, though Ana never admitted to the gesture. The likely punishment would be a painful fine and a temporary disqualification from holding executive roles, but no prison. Alejandro exhaled a breath he'd been holding for months. He thanked an imaginary shadow, then silently whispered, "Thank you, Ana, wherever you are." Ana's public life took off. Invited by the Complutense University to give a lecture on wealth inequality, she accepted, knowing the room would be full of students who still didn't know how much it cost to bury your head in the sand. In the hallways, people spoke of her with a mix of respect and myth. Some critics called her a surgeon of other people's fortunes. She didn't care. That nickname spoke to skill, not glitter. 2 weeks before the event, the university insisted on filming and live streaming the talk. Clara approved. Free publicity for their new international firm. Ana prepared slides, statistics, and a final section where she would share her personal experience, without names, designed as an emotional punch. She had practiced the speech in front of the mirror, tapping into memories of the kitchen, where she kneaded bread and noticed the growing distance in her husband's eyes. Every rehearsal left a slight tremble in her fingers, but that only confirmed the wound was healing without going numb. Pain that's accepted still hurts, it just doesn't paralyze. Alejandro found out about the talk by chance. Miguel was adjusting the brakes on a car while listening to the radio, and a host announced, "Tomorrow at the Complutense, a free lecture by Ana Santos, a leading voice in economic justice." Alejandro froze, wrench in hand. That night, he Googled the event. He read the summary, saw her professional photo, cream blazer, neutral background. He felt pride that wasn't his, pain that was, and a nostalgia he couldn't place. He decided to go. He told himself he needed to hear those tips to fix his finances, but the truth was simple. He wanted to see her succeed, even if it made his eyes bleed. The day of the lecture, he got up at 6, swapped shifts with Miguel, showered in cold water, and pulled out the least worn shirt he had. No time to iron. He arrived at the university half an hour early. The courtyard buzzed with students, cameras, and event staff. No one recognized him. He sat in the second-to-last row of a large auditorium lit by overhead spotlights. The chairs were uncomfortable. He massaged his cracked knuckles while the host read Ana's resume. Dual degrees, certified in advanced negotiation, founder of EOS, winner of the Sor Juana Prize for Legal Innovation. When she walked out, the applause was louder than protocol required. There was real anticipation. Alejandro felt his chest tremble like a misaligned engine frame. Ana started with a hook. Some contracts save lives. Some silence is just noise. And some lawyers don't forget. The room went absolutely quiet. She presented graphs on asset inequality, cited the paradox of financial access, and displayed statistics on invisible fraud. Midway through the talk, she looked up and saw him. She didn't stop. She continued, modulated her voice, and shared her story without naming herself or him. She explained how domestic invisibility had allowed her to soak up data. She said the power of attorney was the master key and that revenge doesn't always smell like gunpowder. Sometimes it smells like fresh ink on a contract. The audience shivered. Alejandro swallowed hard 3 times. He couldn't take his eyes off her or move. At the end, standing ovation. Ana smiled gratefully, but her gaze landed on a young woman in the front row who was crying quietly, not on him. Alejandro remained seated until the room emptied. Then he slowly walked down the steps, like someone descending from an altar after confessing their sins. In the lobby, he leaned against a column to wait. He had an improvised speech ready. Thanks, sorry, pride, sorry again. 10 minutes passed. Ana appeared, surrounded by students asking for selfies and colleagues requesting her card. She glowed, not because of makeup, but because the success came from within. Alejandro imagined a beam of light radiating from her chest, impossible to dim. When there was finally a gap in the crowd, he took 2 steps forward. Stopped. She saw him. Her eyes showed no surprise, no rejection, only calm resolve. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She tilted her head slightly, a greeting without name or promise. He understood the message. There was no room for conversations that would resurrect ghosts. Shoulders heavy, he turned and walked into the outer courtyard. The cold air hit his face. He murmured, "It was always you." The plane tree leaves fell onto the gravel with no applause. No one heard him. No one replied. Ana signed autographs, answered a few journalists, and got into the electric car her team had rented for the day. When the city fell behind and the sunset began coloring the rooftops, she leaned her forehead against the window. Clara, driving, glanced sideways. "You okay?" Ana whispered. "I saw the past look me in the eye." Clara stayed quiet, knowing that some battles require space. Alejandro took the subway back to his neighborhood. He sat in an almost empty car and let the hypnotic rattling drown out his silent sobs. He remembered the nights he dismissed Ana's exhaustion after ironing, the lunch breaks where he mocked her little recipes while she watched in surgical silence. Every memory added weight to the suitcase he now carried. When he got home, there was an official letter in the mailbox, final court ruling. A 70,000 euro fine, 5-year ban from executive roles, case closed. Crushed by the number, he climbed the stairs. It would take 15 years of mechanic wages to pay that fine. He didn't even allow himself to feel anger, just an inner hollowing, like a giant hand had torn out his insides and left an echo. Ana spent the following weeks overseeing integration with the De La Vega group. Trips to Brussels, Sao Paulo, Toronto. In each city, she recruited young female lawyers, signed agreements with local NGOs, and led free workshops. She never slept more than 5 hours, but passion kept her going. Her fame grew so much that Time magazine included her in its list of the year's 100 most influential women. The photographer captured her with no jewelry, her natural curls, a simple blazer, and her head tilted slightly. Minimalist cover. The caption read, "The Quiet Strategist." The magazine arrived at the workshop wrapped in bubble wrap. A supplier had left it on the counter as a joke. Miguel opened it, recognized the speaker, and rushed it over to Alejandro. "She's the woman you saw at the university, right?" Alejandro nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and shame stab at him. The boss came over, let out a whistle, and said, "Started out as a housewife, and look at her now. That's what I call a turbo engine." Alejandro gave a joyless laugh. "The engine I didn't know how to listen to." He stored the magazine in his locker like a relic. Every time he opened it, he remembered Ana's voice explaining how silence can be both a trench and a springboard. The EOS agency launched a pilot program in schools, talks on prenuptial agreements, saving money, and early entrepreneurship. The teenage girls left fascinated. One of them, 15-year-old Martina, wrote a poem that went viral. "I want enough capital to fly without asking the wind for permission." Ana printed the poem and pinned it to her office wall. Time moved quickly. Alejandro had been at the workshop for 2 years. He paid off a third of his fine thanks to a loan backed by a trucker neighbor who didn't ask questions. He agreed to work overtime on Saturdays, gave up red meat, and quit drinking beer. One random Sunday, the exact date didn't matter, he looked at himself in the mirror and noticed the dark circles under his eyes had faded. His face was no longer a map of resentment. Then he picked up his phone, opened his email, and wrote to Clara Galan. "I'd like to pay the remainder of my fine through community service in youth mechanic training programs. Would that be possible?" Clara responded in under 10 minutes. "It's viable if the prosecutor's office approves. I'll draft the request." Alejandro understood someone was interceding again. He didn't ask who. The following semester, the auditorium of a local youth center welcomed him with more restless teens than Allen wrenches. He taught them how to diagnose a diesel engine, how to avoid scams with counterfeit parts, and above all, how to recognize the value of discipline. One of the boys asked, "What was the most expensive thing you ever had?" He meant the sports car, the mansion, the stocks. Alejandro thought for a moment and replied, "I lost the most expensive thing when I stopped caring about the essential." The kids didn't fully understand, but they felt the tremor in his voice. That tremor was the real lesson. At the official inauguration of the new international firm, Ernesto gave a polished speech, Clara presented growth figures, and Ana closed with a short but powerful message. If laws aren't written with women in them, they're not laws, they're traps. After the applause, she went to the dressing room and stayed there alone. She looked at her reflection, steadier eyes, fine lines around the corners, the light shadow of a battle won. She took a breath and told herself, "There's no such thing as total victory, only progress." That mantra defined her. Never confuse a triumph with a pedestal. The next afternoon, she attended the final mediation in a complex divorce case. When it ended, she stepped into the lobby and ran into the notary from the park, the same one who took his car to Alejandro's workshop. He greeted her warmly. "Small world, huh?" Ana smiled. Then, without malice, the notary said, "I hired the new mechanic for a quarterly checkup. He's meticulous. Did you know he used to be a multimillionaire?" Ana nodded and replied, "I know he fixes engines now and teaches young people." That's a bigger fortune than most checkbooks. The notary looked intrigued and shook her hand goodbye. That night, Aina opened her digital journal and wrote, "When guilt learns to become a compass, failure becomes a map." She closed the laptop and turned off the light. Alejandro came home from work and found a letter with an official letterhead, "Request approved." He would complete his sentence by leading workshops. He smiled in quiet gratitude. He opened the window. The air smelled like the nearby bakery, reminding him of the homemade dough Aina used to knead at dawn. He didn't feel hunger, just a wave of unexpected tenderness. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, the EOS agency released a newsletter announcing the launch of the Colibri platform, a global network of microloans for recently divorced women or single mothers in need of seed capital. The project included cooperative auto repair workshops where women would learn basic vehicle maintenance to cut costs. Clara asked, "Mechanics?" Aina replied, "Engines teach ethics faster than any manual." And she thought of Alejandro, with no bitterness, no nostalgia. Just a wink to fate. 2 months later, Forbes updated its list of former CEOs who had reinvented themselves. They included Alejandro in a brief entry. From skyscrapers to the neighborhood, he now trains 100 youths a year. The blurb mentioned that his ex-wife helped drive part of the program. There was no mockery, just facts. Alejandro read the article during a workshop break and smiled for the first time with no tension in his jaw. One early morning, the city slept under a gentle rain. In a modest studio, Alejandro stored his tools neatly and turned off the radio. He sat on a stool, opened the still plastic-wrapped Time magazine, and reread the article on the 100 women. When he saw Aina's face, he whispered, "In the end, your silence shouted louder than any speech." He closed the magazine carefully, like a fragile Bible, and placed it on the shelf next to automotive manuals. Then he wrote in his notebook, "Goal for next year, establish a workshop school funded by Colibri scholarships. Ask Aina if she agrees." Sometimes, love isn't lost. It transforms into a lesson for those brave enough to face themselves honestly. And sometimes a woman's silence isn't resignation, it's the sheet music of a plan dancing with the future. Those who fail to value what they have end up serving those who knew how to wait. Life always collects, with interest. Aina became the center of her own universe. Alejandro, who once had it all, was left with a lesson carved into memory. And in that delicate balance, they both breathed in peace. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear what you felt while listening. If you've experienced a similar betrayal, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to tell me which city you're watching from. I'd be honored if you leave a like, share this video with a friend or family member, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next incredible story coming up on your screen. We've got entertainment made just for you. See you in the next video.